It's the idea of consolidating power in the presidency. Perhaps that's one reason why the idea of presidential immunity does not appear in the Constitution, as Justice Kagan pointed out.
The framers did not put an immunity clause into the Constitution. They knew how to. There were immunity clauses in some state constitutions. They knew how to give legislative immunity. They didn't provide immunity to the president. And, not so surprising, they were reacting against a monarch who claimed to be above the law. Wasn't the whole point that the president was not a monarch and the president was not supposed to be above the law?
I would say two things in response to that. Immunity, they did put an immunity clause in a sense. They put in the executive vesting clause, which was originally understood to adopt a broad immunity principle that's set forth in the very broad language of Marbury against Madison. And also, they did discuss and consider what would be the checks on the presidency. And they did not say, we need to have criminal prosecution. Right there at the Constitutional Convention, Benjamin Franklin says, we don't have that. That's not an option. Everybody cried out against that as unconstitutional. The structural check we're adopting is impeachment. And they're very clear on that in pages 64 to 69 of the second volume of Farrand.
Again, Mr. Sauer refers to the non-existent immunity he believes inherent in the executive powers. The reaction to Mr. Franklin's statement about the impeachment clause and Marbury versus Madison case, all of which I've shown to be misleading. The last of Mr. Sauer's arguments I'll deal with came in response to a question from Justice Barrett.
So, Mr. Sauer, you've argued that the impeachment clause suggests or requires impeachment to be a gateway to criminal prosecution, right?
Yes, I think that's the plain meaning of that second phrase in the clause.
There are actually two impeachment clauses. Article 2, Section 4, which describes who can be impeached and for what, and Article 1, Section 3, Clause 7, which describes the punishment. Judgment in cases of impeachment shall not extend further than to removal from office and disqualification to hold and enjoy any office of honor, trust, or profit under the United States. But the party convicted shall nevertheless be liable and subject to indictment, trial, judgment, and punishment according to the law. This clause states that after conviction of impeachment, the party is still liable for any violations of the law. There's nothing in this language that states that the person involved is immune from criminal prosecution until they're removed from office by impeachment. Justice Barrett brings up another point.
Okay, so there are many other people who are subject to impeachment, including the 9 sitting on this bench, and I don't think anyone has ever suggested that impeachment would have to be the gateway to criminal prosecution for any of the many other officers subject to impeachment. So why is the president different when the impeachment clause doesn't say so?
Someone very important has made the opposite suggestion as to the president himself, which is Solicitor General Bork, which is reaffirmed in the OLC opinions on this, where Solicitor General Bork in 1973, as to the issue of the vice president, reviewed the historical materials, and he said the sequence is mandatory only as to the president. That is DOJ's view of the original understanding of the impeachment judgment clause, which is exactly our position. The sequence is mandatory only as to the president. Keep in mind that the criminal prosecution of a president prior to impeachment contradicts, in our view, the plain language of the Constitution, but also hundreds of years of history, and what DOJ admits is the framers' intent.
So Mr. Sauer is now quoting two sources from the Department of Justice, a part of the executive branch, that claim the impeachment clause requires something that it does not state. First, that the clause requires impeachment before prosecution, and second, that the rules for the president are different than for the vice president, other civil officers, and, as Justice Barrett noted, federal judges.